Richard Gere was once everything Hollywood: handsome, enigmatic, sensual, and rebellious. He didn't just act, he radiated charisma. With just a glance, he earned millions. With just a smile, he stole hearts. He became a global sensation in Pretty Woman and cemented his status as a sex symbol in American Gigolo, where he boldly portrayed an upscale escort, bearing more than just skin. He revealed attitude, control, and allure. Over 2 decades, Gere wasn't just a movie star. He was the benchmark of masculinity, the embodiment of cool. And then, he disappeared. No scandals, no goodbye tour, no final box office bomb. One day, Hollywood simply moved on, and so did he. No one knew why, no one knew where. The biggest question wasn't just why he left, but what he left with. He walked away empty-handed, or with something much deeper. Behind the scenes, Richard Gere quietly built an American empire, not in film, but in land. He owned sprawling estates across the country, luxurious homes in suburban New York, a mansion in Connecticut, and a high-end apartment in the heart of Manhattan. His properties had private forests, horse stables, man-made streams, guest houses, and wine cellars. For a time, Gere lived like modern-day royalty. And then, he sold it all. No press release, no tell-all memoir, just gone. Richard Gere left America, the land that made him a star, the land he once owned in pieces. No one could understand why a man who had it all, over $120 million in wealth, legendary fame, cultural status, would choose to walk away. He didn't buy a mega yacht. He didn't start a business. He didn't relocate to Beverly Hills. He disappeared from the map of fame. So, where is he now? What made him leave? What pushed him to turn his back on the industry that once crowned him king? More mysteriously, what is he still holding on to? What has he kept, hidden, that doesn't fit the Hollywood image at all? To find out why Richard Gere left the spotlight, the wealth, and America itself, we need to go back to Hollywood, but to a small, quiet town where a boy once believed that music and ideas could change the world. On August 31, 1949, near Syracuse, New York, Richard Gere grew up in a modest home. His father sold insurance. His mother stayed at home. No one was connected to the arts. Yet the house was filled with something more powerful than glamour: discipline, music, and thought. Even as a child, Gere didn't quite move with the crowd. He wasn't chasing stardom. In high school, he was a dedicated trumpet player and an award-winning gymnast. He stood out, not for being loud, but for being deeply focused. In 1967, he earned a scholarship to the University of Massachusetts Amherst, majoring in both philosophy and theater, an unusual combination that hinted at the man he would become. 2 years later, he dropped out. Not out of failure, but out of clarity. He didn't need a diploma. He needed purpose. He began acting in small theater productions in Seattle and New York, taking every role he could get, anonymous, unpaid, unnoticed. But he believed, even the quietest voices can be heard. Then came his first break. In 1975, Gere portrayed a death row inmate in The Killer's Head, performing blindfolded, relying only on his voice. That limitation revealed his greatest strength, not his looks, but a rare, magnetic presence. From there, the roles got bigger, looking for Mr. Goodbar, Days of Heaven, Yanks. But his true ascent began when John Travolta turned down a risky role, and Richard Gere took it. That film was American Gigolo. From the moment he appeared on screen, unapologetic, exposed, and composed, he stopped being an actor. He became an icon, the face of a new kind of masculinity. Quiet, intense, self-assured. American Gigolo didn't just elevate Gere, it electrified pop culture. 2 years later, he starred in An Officer and a Gentleman, a romantic military drama that earned nearly $130 million at the box office and multiple Oscar nods. Even at the height of fame, Richard Gere didn't follow the script. Instead of repeating safe roles, he took on Bent, a bold stage play about homosexual victims of Nazi persecution. The performance earned him the Theatre World Award, but more importantly, it made a statement. Gere didn't act to be adored, he acted to explore. Richard Gere dove deep into roles that explored inner conflict and moral tension. In Internal Affairs, 1990, he played a corrupt cop unraveling from within. In Primal Fear, 1996, he matched wits with a cunning teenage sociopath, a role that catapulted Edward Norton into stardom. In The Jackal, 1997, he transformed into a former Irish soldier with a pitch-perfect Irish accent, holding his ground opposite Bruce Willis. But for many, the moment that forever sealed Richard Gere into cinematic memory came in Pretty Woman, 1990. Ironically, he nearly turned it down. The script felt too sugary, too risky. But one meeting with Julia Roberts changed everything. Their chemistry was electric, undeniable. Gere said yes. The result? A staggering $463 million in global revenue on a $14 million budget. A pop culture phenomenon was born. Richard Gere officially joined the ranks of Hollywood's untouchable leading men. Throughout the 1990s, he mastered the balance of mainstream success and meaningful storytelling. From Summersby and Runaway Bride to First Night and Red Corner, he consistently delivered, and his salary reflected it, rising from $2 million to $5 million, and eventually $13 million per film. His artistic peak arrived in the early 2000s with Chicago. As slick-talking lawyer Billy Flynn, Gere dazzled in a dark musical that was as stylish as it was cynical. The role earned him a Golden Globe and returned him to center stage. This time, not for looks, but for raw talent honed over decades. In total, he starred in over 50 films, created dozens of iconic moments, and brought in hundreds of millions at the box office. Despite the acclaim, one odd truth remains. Richard Gere was never nominated for an Oscar. Many believe he deserved it, whether for Days of Heaven or Arbitrage, where he played a crumbling financier hiding dark secrets. But perhaps that's precisely why he stepped away. His career didn't need a golden statue to feel whole. It was already full enough to walk away, with dignity and peace. At his peak, Richard Gere was earning millions per film. His net worth soared past $120 million. But unlike many of his peers who indulged in super yachts, private jets, and Beverly Hills mega mansions, Gere built something else, something quieter. In New York State, he bought an old inn and transformed it into the Bedford Post Inn, a boutique 8-room hotel nestled in the woods. Guests come not to party, but to reflect. Yoga sessions, organic meals, silence. There's no bar, no booming music, no velvet rope nightlife. It wasn't just a business. It was a manifesto. In Tuscany, Italy, where he once spent hours walking just to hear the breeze and the clink of wine glasses, Gere partnered with Tenuta San Filippo to produce Brunello di Montalcino, one of Italy's finest wines. Under the Bedford Post label, each bottle carries complexity, deep tannins, a sweet finish, and a whisper of solitude. "I can't imagine a meal without wine," he once said, not as a boast, but as an ode to the rhythm of life. A slow, thoughtful rhythm. Now in his 70s, Richard Gere doesn't chase time. He strolls through gardens. He plays with his young children. He meditates each morning and joins his wife in environmental and humanitarian efforts. His life isn't chaotic, but it's never empty. It's not loud, but it's always rich. What stands out is this. He chose this life while still in his prime. When he could have made 10 more films, raked in millions more. He walked away not because he lacked, but because he had already found what truly mattered. Over 3 decades, Richard Gere's real estate portfolio rivaled any Hollywood elite. The properties he kept, restored, and eventually let go of all had one thing in common. They were sanctuaries, expressions of a deeper philosophy. In 1987, as his stardom soared, Gere purchased a home in Pound Ridge, New York, for $1.5 million. Not in Beverly Hills or Malibu, but in a secluded town just outside Manhattan. He gradually expanded the estate, adding 5 guest houses, horse stables, 9 fireplaces, ponds, and private trails. Over 50 acres of living retreat. He stayed there for 30 years, out of the spotlight, out of reach. Then, in 2022, he sold it. Price, $28 million. There was no press release. No exclusive photos. Just a quiet listing and a discreet sale. Months later, he reappeared, this time, in New Canaan, Connecticut. Had purchased a historic estate once owned by Paul Simon and Edie Brickell. The 31-acre property had it all. A 6-bedroom, 11-bathroom mansion, a separate guest house, waterfalls, woodland trails, and a fish pond. Classic English charm tucked into the Connecticut hills. But again, he wasn't just buying a home. He was planting a vision. Gere submitted plans to the New Canaan Planning Commission to convert 27 acres into a working eco-farm, mushrooms, bees, maybe even goats. A self-sustaining, earth-connected way of life. A place where his family could grow, not in status, but in spirit. And then, in 2024, just 2 years later, and then, he sold it. Again. The price, €10.75 million. Virtually breaking even. The eco-farm project, cancelled. Everything, quietly listed, swiftly transferred. No scandal, no financial collapse, no farewell message, just one undeniable truth. Richard Gere left the United States. His destination wasn't London, it wasn't the south of France. It was Alcobendas, a tranquil suburb north of Madrid. There, he purchased an €11 million villa complete with a private wine cellar, sprawling gardens, horse stables, and 34 acres of freedom. Enough space for his 2 young sons to run all day without reaching a single fence. No luxury fountains. No exotic supercars. No towering gates or armed security. Just the rustle of wind through trees, the sound of Spanish voices, and family. His wife's family, close by. "My wife gave me 6 years to live in my world," he told Vanity Fair Spain. "Now, I think it's time I live in hers." So in his 70s, Richard Gere didn't just retire, he disappeared from the very country that once made him everything. He left behind the fame, the attention, and began again, in a place no one could find, in a home no paparazzi could photograph, living a life with no schedule and no spotlight. But he didn't completely sever ties. He kept a few pieces of his past for when he might return. Quiet apartment in Gramercy Park, New York, purchased in 2016 on Jimmy Fallon's recommendation. A house in Southampton he once bought for $6.5 million, and later sold for an astonishing $36 million. An older apartment, where he spent 2 decades of his life, now quietly rented out for $20,000 a month. Less a residence, more a time capsule, now gently commercialized. It's clear, Richard Gere didn't abandon America. He simply chose not to carry it with him. And it wasn't just homes. What he chose to keep, or let go, reflected the way he lived. His garage, for instance, held no million-dollar hypercars. Instead, it contained a carefully curated collection, chosen not to impress, but to enjoy. He once owned a Jaguar E-Type, the very car Enzo Ferrari called the most beautiful in the world, a Mercedes-Benz R107, the refined coupe of the 70s, known for its quiet sophistication. A 2015 Jaguar XK, sleek, wood-trimmed, with a powerful V8 that never needed to roar. And a 2004 Lotus Esprit, low-slung, sensual, and rare. A private thrill, never flaunted. These weren't props for magazine shoots. They were his cars. And when it was time to let them go, he did. In 2023, Richard Gere auctioned off his 1999 Jaguar XK8 convertible for $31,000. The proceeds went to victims of war in Ukraine. No red carpet event, no press tour, no hashtags, just action. Because for Gere, what he does with his wealth speaks louder than any possession. But the most valuable thing he's kept isn't on any deed, title, or bank statement. It's a symbolic legacy, an invisible wealth, built not with dollars, but with purpose. Through the Gere Foundation, Tibet House US, and the International Campaign for Tibet, where he serves as chairman, he spent decades fighting for human rights, religious freedom, healthcare, and education. He stood firm in his advocacy for the Tibetan people, despite immense pressure from China. As a result, he's been blacklisted from China, and from Hollywood's biggest franchises. Still, he has never apologized. Beyond that, Gere supports Survival International, a non-profit that defends the rights of indigenous communities worldwide. He also founded an HIV/AIDS charity in India, building clinics for women and children living with the disease. Walk into his private study, and you won't find movie posters or awards. You'll find Buddhist scrolls, ancient statues, and sacred handwritten texts. Artifacts with no market value, but immeasurable meaning. Treasures only someone who truly sees can appreciate. These aren't symbols of rejection. They're signs of refinement. Because Richard Gere never rejected wealth. He simply redefined it. Every piece of land he walked, every home he created, every car he drove, every cause he championed, they all say the same thing. He wasn't chasing fame, he was following something quieter, deeper, not less, but more. He simply chose to be rich in a way Hollywood could never reenact. He sold his house, traded land, changed his entire lifestyle. But the deepest shift in Richard Gere's life didn't come from real estate, politics, or even age. It came from a woman, and from the 2 small children who now call him Dad. At an age when many Hollywood legends retreat into quiet solitude behind the walls of past glory, Richard Gere is arranging flowers with his 4-year-old son in a garden outside Madrid. A scene so peaceful, and so unexpected, for a man once defined by cold allure and seductive detachment on screen. Alejandra Silva, his wife, is a Spanish social activist and the daughter of former Real Madrid vice president Ignacio Silva. Born into wealth and attention, she chose instead a quiet life committed to humanitarian work. 2 married in 2018 in a modest New York ceremony. 2 seemingly opposite worlds meeting, not for headlines, but for something rare, belonging. A year later, at 70, Richard Gere became a father again. The first son, Alexander, was born in 2019. A second son followed in 2020. His name remains private. Gere is a late-in-life father, but never late in how he loves. Once the introspective, solitary heartthrob, he now spends most of his days at home, playing with his sons, walking with them, telling them stories, being present at every meal. No entourage, no round-the-clock nannies, no blurred lines between mom's job and dad's. He's just there, fully, not with money, but with time. He once said something very simple: happy wife, happy life. For his wife, he left America. For his wife, he sold a property he had cherished for 35 years. For his wife, he learned Spanish. Changed countries, changed clocks, changed what success meant. In 2024, after selling all his US assets, Richard Gere officially moved his family to Spain, full-time, not to a retreat, not to a vacation home, but to a real home. A historic villa in Alcobendas, north of Madrid, a place to begin again, quietly. He told Vanity Fair Spain, "My wife gave me 6 years to live in my world. Now it's time I live in hers." But Gere doesn't just live to enjoy. Alongside Alejandra, he works with Hogar, a non-profit aiming to end homelessness in Spain within 5 years. They also support Sierra Amar in Mexico, a coastal restoration project focused on sustainability. Gere doesn't give speeches. He invests. He watches. He builds impact without needing attention. At the end of 2024, Richard Gere hosted Christmas at his Madrid home, 35 relatives, 3 generations. After Alejandra's grandmother passed, it was Gere who encouraged her to become the family's center, continuing Sunday lunches filled with warmth and connection. For him now, success means laughter, his children's voices, and mornings without alarms. He has 3 sons, each from a different era. Homer, born in 2000 with ex-wife Carrie Lowell, remains close and involved in Gere's humanitarian work. Alexander and his youngest, Gere embraced fatherhood again, slower, wiser, fully present. This is not the life you'd expect from the man who once defined Hollywood sensuality. He meditates, grows vegetables, tends his garden. He's been shedding the spotlight for decades. Since his 20s, Gere has followed Zen Buddhism, formally initiated by the Dalai Lama. His path didn't lead to retreat, but to clarity, compassion, and a softer strength. He once said, "Stop treating yourself like an afterthought, there's no time for anything else." It's not a quote, it's how he lives. For over 2 decades, he's turned down hollow scripts and roles that sexualize aging men. Instead, he chose thoughtful performances, arbitrage, Norman, time out of mind, not blockbusters, but real. And in life, he eats clean, practices yoga, grows his food, pours his own wine, and never uses his phone in conversation. Because to Richard Gere, stillness is power. The Bedford Post Inn in New York, Gere's quiet passion project, reflects his philosophy: just 8 rooms, no bar, no loud music, just yoga, wine, and a slower rhythm. In Italy, he even commissioned a special Brunello di Montalcino under the same label, shared only at charity events, never for sale. No yachts, no private jet, no flashy startups or fashion lines. While others chased fame, Gere chose something rarer: a clear mind, quiet kindness, and a life that needs no explanation. In an age obsessed with being seen, he chose to disappear, just to be real. He once said, "Stop treating yourself like an afterthought," and he's lived it. No longer chasing roles or awards, he now holds a wealth that can't be measured: peace, presence, and a home full of love. His net worth may be $120 million, but his true legacy is freedom. Not a retreat, but a return to simplicity, to stillness, to self. Maybe, when we stop needing to be seen, that's when we're finally seen the most clearly. Would you trade the spotlight for peace? Let us know in the comments, and if this resonated, subscribe for more stories of lives lived differently.